The envelope felt wrong the moment my grandson Lucas slipped it into my coat pocket during our family's Thanksgiving dinner. We were standing by the buffet table, surrounded by the warm chaos of 20 relatives laughing and passing dishes, when his hand moved so quickly I almost missed it. But I caught the look in his eyes, that same expression he'd worn at 8 years old when he tried to warn me about the wasp's nest before I reached for the garden hose. He was 23 now, a software engineer with his own apartment in Toronto, and he shouldn't have looked that frightened. "Grandpa," he whispered, leaning in to grab the cranberry sauce. "Don't open it here. Wait until you're alone." Before I could respond, my daughter-in-law, Patricia, appeared with her camera, all smiles and perfectly styled blonde hair, insisting on a photo of Lucas and me together. I wrapped my arm around my grandson's shoulders, feeling the envelope press against my ribs through my shirt pocket, and forced myself to smile while Patricia's flash went off 3 times. "Perfect," she said, checking the screen. "Your grandson loves you so much, doesn't he, Richard?" The way she said it made my skin crawl. There was something performative about it, like she was narrating a script rather than observing a moment. But I'd learned to ignore Patricia's peculiarities over the past 3 years since my son David married her. She was ambitious, controlling, and had strong opinions about how our family gatherings should be documented on social media, but David seemed happy enough. I excused myself to use the washroom, my hand already moving toward the envelope. The upstairs bathroom was far from the noise, and I locked the door before pulling out the single sheet of paper. "Grandpa, I found something on Dad's computer last week. He doesn't know I was using his laptop. Please, please don't tell him I told you. Check your bank accounts tonight. All of them. Especially the investment account Dad manages for you, and the life insurance policy you set up with him as the beneficiary. Something's wrong. I'm scared. I'll explain more later, but not at the house. Can we meet at Tim Hortons on Queen Street tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Come alone. Delete this note. Samantinado. And Nindinweth." My hands shook as I read it twice more. David managed my finances. That had been the arrangement since my mild heart attack 2 years ago. I'd handed over the passwords and account access because navigating online banking exhausted me, and David was a financial advisor. It made sense. He was my son, except now my grandson was warning me about him. I tore the note into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet, then splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I looked every one of my 67 years. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper, and my gray hair looked thin under the bathroom's harsh lighting. When had I become this old man who needed his children to manage his money? When I returned downstairs, David was holding court in the living room, telling a story about a client who'd tried to invest their entire retirement fund in cryptocurrency. Everyone laughed at the punchline. My son was 42, handsome and confident, wearing the expensive watch I'd given him last Christmas. He caught my eye and raised his glass of wine in a silent toast. I raised mine back, feeling like a traitor. Patricia touched my elbow. "Richard, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired," I said. "Big meal. You should sit down. Your heart, you know." She guided me toward the couch with a hand that felt more like a claw. "David worries about you so much." I let her fuss over me, arranging pillows behind my back because it was easier than arguing. Through the doorway, I could see Lucas in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with jerky, anxious movements. Our eyes met briefly. He gave the smallest shake of his head a warning not to say anything. The rest of the evening crawled by. I played with my granddaughter Emma, who was 6 and insisted I read her the same picture book 3 times. I complimented Patricia's turkey, which was dry. I listened to my daughter-in-law's sister complain about her ex-husband's new girlfriend, and all the while, Lucas's note burned in my mind like a brand. At 9:30, I announced I was heading home. David insisted on walking me to my car, his arm around my shoulders, in a gesture that now felt suffocating rather than affectionate. "You sure you're okay, Dad? You've seemed distracted all evening." "Just getting old," I said, fishing for my keys. "Can't keep up with these big family dinners like I used to." "Well, you don't have to worry about anything. That's what I'm here for." He squeezed my shoulder. "Managing your accounts, making sure everything's set up right, it gives me peace of mind, knowing you're taken care of." "I appreciate that, son. And Dad? I've been meaning to talk to you about increasing your life insurance policy. With interest rates what they are, it's actually a smart investment vehicle right now. I'll bring the paperwork by next week." My throat went dry. Life insurance? Just a modest increase. 250,000 to $500,000. At your age, it's wise to think about these things. For the family, you know. He smiled. Patricia and I want to make sure everyone's protected. I drove home on autopilot, my mind spinning. The life insurance comment could be innocent. David was a financial advisor, after all. But combined with Lucas's note, it felt like a noose tightening. My house was dark and empty. My wife Margaret had died 4 years ago, and I still hadn't gotten used to coming home to silence. I turned on every light in the kitchen and opened my laptop with shaking hands. The bank's website loaded slowly. I typed in my password, the one David had helped me set up, and waited. When my accounts appeared on screen, I had to read the numbers 3 times before they made sense. My savings account showed $42,000. It should have been close to $90,000. The investment account David managed showed $135,000. It should have been over $300,000. $153,000 was missing. I pulled up the transaction history, scrolling through months of transfers. They were small at first, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. But in the past 6 months, they'd grown larger, $20,000, $30,000. Each one marked as portfolio rebalancing or investment opportunity. RW Ventures. RW Ventures. Richard Williams Ventures. My name. My initials. But I'd never heard of this company. I sat at my kitchen table until past midnight, printing out statements and transaction records. The pattern was clear once I looked for it. The transfers had started about a year ago, right after I'd signed over power of attorney to David for convenience. The amounts had accelerated after my heart attack, when I'd been too weak and frightened to pay attention to financial details. My son was stealing from me. Had been stealing from me for months. The worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was the life insurance comment. If David was willing to drain my accounts, what else was he willing to do? The policy currently had him listed as the primary beneficiary, $250,000 that would pay out when I died. And now he wanted to double it. I thought about my heart medication in the bathroom cabinet, the bottles David had picked up from the pharmacy for me just last week. At 9:50 the next morning, I was sitting in the Tim Hortons on Queen Street with a coffee I couldn't drink. Lucas arrived exactly at 10, looking like he hadn't slept. He slid into the booth across from me and immediately pulled out his phone. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I didn't know how to tell you. I only found out because Dad left his laptop open and I saw the bank transfer confirmation on his screen. I got curious and started digging through his files." He showed me screenshots, internal emails between David and Patricia planning the accelerated timeline for accessing the inheritance. Spreadsheets calculating how long it would take to drain my accounts without me noticing. And worst of all, a life insurance quote with my name on it, dated 2 weeks ago, with a handwritten note in David's writing. Increase policy. Rich has heart condition. Actuarial tables favor payout within 3 to 5 years. "There's more," Lucas said quietly. "I found research on heart medications, side effects, interactions, what happens if you double the dose. And Grandpa, your medication bottles at Dad's house? The ones he keeps there for when you visit? I checked them. The pills don't match the label. They're the same medication, but they're twice the strength." The Tim Hortons suddenly felt too hot, too bright. "What are you saying?" "I think they're trying to kill you, or at least make you sicker, faster." Lucas's voice cracked. "The money's already gone. They've been moving it to offshore accounts. But with the life insurance, they'd get even more when something happens to you." I stared at my grandson. He looked so young, so scared, and so certain, and I knew he was telling the truth. "We need to go to the police," I said. "With what?" "Dad's good at this stuff. The financial transfers all look legitimate: investment, rebalancing, portfolio management. He's got documentation for everything. And the medication thing? He'd say the pharmacy made a mistake, or that you confused the bottles. It's your word against his, and he's the financial professional." Lucas leaned forward. "We need more evidence, something that proves intent." "How?" "Let me handle that part. But Grandpa, you can't let on that you know anything. Not yet. And you need to be careful. Don't take any medication that Dad gives you. Don't eat or drink anything Patricia offers you when you're at their house. And for God's sake, don't sign any new insurance papers." We spent the next hour planning. Lucas was surprisingly strategic for a 23-year-old. He'd already thought through most of the angles. He'd make copies of the files from David's computer. I'd gather all my financial documents and bring them to a lawyer. We'd build a case methodically, carefully, until we had enough evidence that the police couldn't ignore. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as we prepared to leave. "He's your father." Lucas looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older. "He stopped being my father when he started planning to murder you for money. You're my grandpa. You taught me how to skate, how to build model airplanes, how to be honest even when it's hard. I'm not going to let him hurt you." The next week was the longest of my life. I went to David's office for our usual Thursday lunch and listened to him talk about investment strategies while my coffee sat untouched in front of me. Patricia invited me over for Sunday dinner, and I watched her plate my food with a smile that no longer reached her eyes, then claimed my stomach was upset and barely ate anything. I maintained my routine, played my part as the aging father who trusted his son with everything. But at night, I met Lucas in coffee shops and parking lots, watching him build his case. He'd installed monitoring software on David's computer during a visit. He'd photographed documents, recorded conversations, traced the money from my accounts through a series of shell companies that all led back to accounts David and Patricia controlled. And then, 2 weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, Lucas found the smoking gun. It was an email thread between David and Patricia, discussing accelerating the timeline because I'd been asking questions about my accounts. David had written, "Old man's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. I'll increase his medication dosage this week. With his heart condition, everyone will think it's natural causes. Then we're clear." Patricia's response, "Make sure it looks like an accident. And remember, we need him to sign the new insurance papers before anything happens. That's an extra $250K we can't leave on the table." Lucas sent the email to my phone while I was sitting in my lawyer's office. Sarah Chen was a family law attorney who'd handled Margaret's estate, and she stared at her computer screen for a long moment after reading the evidence. "This is attempted murder," she said finally, "or conspiracy to commit murder, at minimum. Combined with the financial fraud, we're looking at serious prison time. You need to call the police right now." But I couldn't move. That was my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, who'd cried in my arms when his mother died, the man who was planning to kill me for $500,000 in insurance money. Sarah made the call for me. The police took it seriously once they saw the evidence. Within 2 days, they'd obtained warrants for David's computer and financial records. They brought in a pharmaceutical expert who confirmed the medication bottles had been tampered with. The pills inside were indeed double strength, which could have caused fatal heart complications given my condition. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Detective Morgan, explained they were building a fraud and attempted murder case. But they needed one more thing. They needed David to incriminate himself on record. "We'd like you to have a conversation with your son," Detective Morgan said, wearing a wire. "Ask him about the investments, about the missing money. See if he'll admit to anything." "You want me to bait my own son into a confession?" "I want to make sure he doesn't try this with anyone else's father. And Mr. Williams' time is a factor here. He's planning to increase your medication dosage. We have the email. If we wait too long..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I agreed to wear the wire. 3 days later, I called David and told him I needed to talk about my accounts. I kept my voice shaky, confused, an old man who didn't quite understand his finances. He suggested coming over to his house that evening to go through everything together. When I arrived, Patricia answered the door with Emma on her hip and that same practiced smile. "Richard, what a lovely surprise. David's in his office. Can I get you some tea?" "No, thank you," I said quickly. I just had coffee. David's home office was all dark wood and leather, designed to impress clients. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the supplicant's chair. I suddenly realized, how many times had I sat there while he explained my own money to me, using terms I didn't understand. "So, Dad, you had some questions about your accounts?" I pulled out the printed statements I'd brought. "I'm a bit confused about these transfers. RW Ventures? I don't remember approving those." "That's the investment fund I set up in your name. We discussed it, remember? After your heart attack, you wanted me to handle the more complex investment decisions." His voice was patient, patronizing. "It's all been performing very well, but the balance seems lower than I expected. I thought I had close to 300,000 in investments." Something flickered across David's face. Irritation, quickly masked. "Dad, we've gone over this. The market's been volatile. I've been rebalancing your portfolio to protect your principal. Some short-term losses are normal. Short-term losses of over $150,000? Now the mask slipped further. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking where my money went. David stood up, suddenly filling the space with an anger I'd rarely seen from him. I've spent 2 years managing your finances, Dad. 2 years of phone calls and paperwork and making sure you're taken care of. And this is the thanks I get? Accusations? I just want to understand. You want to understand? Fine. Let me spell it out for you. You're 67 years old, with a heart condition. You can barely work your laptop without help. You've been getting confused, forgetful. Remember last month when you couldn't find your car keys? They were in the refrigerator, Dad. The refrigerator. I hadn't remembered that incident, and I suddenly wondered if it had actually happened, or if David was gaslighting me now. So I've been taking care of everything, he continued. Your bills, your investments, your medications, making sure you're comfortable and safe. And yes, I've made some investment decisions that haven't panned out perfectly. But that's not theft, Dad. That's me trying to help you. What about the life insurance? I asked quietly. His eyes went cold. What about it? You want to increase the policy, double it, with you as the beneficiary, for the family. So there's money to take care of final expenses, to help Lucas with college loans, to make sure Patricia and Emma are provided for. That's called being responsible, Dad. That's called planning ahead, even if something happens to me sooner rather than later. The room went very quiet. Outside the office, I could hear Patricia playing with Emma, their laughter floating down the hall. David sat back down in his chair and steepled his fingers, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. What exactly are you accusing me of? This was it. The moment Detective Morgan had prepped me for. I touched the wire under my shirt, hidden beneath my sweater, and took a breath. I'm asking if you've been stealing from me, and I'm asking if you've been tampering with my medication. For a long moment, David said nothing. Then he smiled, not the warm smile I remembered from his childhood, but something colder, calculated. You can't prove anything, he said softly. Every transfer was authorized. You gave me power of attorney. You signed off on the investment decisions. And if you're having issues with your medication, that's between you and your pharmacy, Dad. I've only ever picked up your prescriptions and brought them to you. If there was a mistake, I had nothing to do with it. So you're saying you didn't take my money? I'm saying I made investment decisions you authorized me to make. Some of those investments haven't performed as well as we hoped. That's the nature of the market. As for the rest, he leaned forward. Dad, you're not well. Your heart, your memory. Maybe it's time to consider more intensive care. Patricia and I have been looking at some excellent assisted living facilities. Somewhere you'd have 24-hour support, medication management, all your needs taken care of. The threat was clear. If I pushed this, he'd have me declared incompetent. I see, I said, standing up. My legs shook. I think I need to go. Dad. For a moment, his expression softened, and I saw a flash of something that might have been genuine emotion. I am trying to take care of you. I know it's hard to accept that you need help, but that's what family does. We take care of each other. I left without answering. Patricia tried to stop me at the door, insisting I take some leftover casserole for dinner, but I pushed past her and got to my car before I fell apart. Detective Morgan was waiting in an unmarked vehicle 2 blocks away. She helped me remove the wire with gentle, efficient hands. You did great, Richard. That's exactly what we needed. He didn't actually confess to anything, I said. My voice sounded hollow. He confirmed he managed your accounts and had access to your medication. Combined with the financial records and the emails Lucas found, plus the pharmaceutical evidence, we have enough for charges. The Crown Attorney is already preparing the case. They arrested David 3 days later at his office. Patricia was taken into custody the same morning at their home. Lucas called me from his apartment, his voice breaking with a mixture of relief and grief. It's over, Grandpa. They can't hurt you now. But it wasn't over. The trial took 8 months. I sat through testimony about shell companies and offshore accounts, listened to experts explain how the doctored medication could have caused fatal heart complications, watched David and Patricia's lawyers argue that I was a confused old man who'd authorized every transaction and mixed up his own prescriptions. Lucas testified about the emails he'd found, the planning documents, the calculated discussions about accelerating the timeline. The prosecution's pharmaceutical expert demonstrated how easy it would be to swap medication in the bottles David had been bringing me. And the financial forensic accountant traced every dollar of my missing money through the network of fake companies David had created. In the end, the jury took 4 days to deliberate. David was convicted of fraud, theft over $5,000, and conspiracy to commit murder. Patricia was convicted as an accomplice. He got 12 years. She got 7. I sat in the courtroom and watched my son being led away in handcuffs, and I couldn't feel anything at all. The money was returned. Mostly the courts seized David and Patricia's assets, liquidated the shell companies, recovered about $130,000 of what they'd stolen. The rest was gone, spent on their house, their cars, their lifestyle. But I was alive, which was more than I would have been if Lucas hadn't found that email. Emma went to live with Patricia's mother. I see her sometimes, supervised visits where we color pictures and read books and don't talk about why her parents aren't there. She's 10 now and asks fewer questions than she used to. I try to be the grandfather she needs, but there's a wariness in her eyes that never goes away. Lucas graduated with honors and moved to Vancouver for a job with a tech company. We talk every week on video calls. He's seeing a therapist, working through the trauma of turning in his own father. Sometimes he asks if I think he did the right thing. I always tell him yes, always, because it's the truth. It's been 3 years since the arrest. I'm 70 now, and my heart is still giving me trouble, but my new doctor says I'm doing well considering everything I've been through. I manage my own finances now. I took a class at the Senior Center on online banking and learned how to read investment statements. I'm not helpless. I never was. I just trusted the wrong person. But here's what I want you to understand, because this is the part that matters. Financial abuse of elders is more common than you think. According to the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, older Canadians lose approximately $300 million annually to financial exploitation. And in 70% of cases, the abuser is a family member. Someone you trust, someone you love. The warning signs are there if you know what to look for. Unexplained withdrawals from bank accounts, bills that suddenly go unpaid, someone pressuring you to sign documents you don't understand, family members who isolate you from others or insist on controlling all your financial decisions, changes in account access or sudden modifications to wills and power of attorney. And if you see these signs in your own life or in the life of an older person you care about, speak up. Tell someone. Call the police. Call a lawyer. Call the Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario hotline at 1-866-299-1011. Don't wait. Don't rationalize it away. Don't tell yourself that family would never hurt you, because sometimes they do. I think about the people who helped me. Lucas, who risked his relationship with his father to save my life. Sarah Chen, my lawyer, who took my case seriously even though I was just another old man with a family problem. Detective Morgan, who treated attempted murder of a senior citizen as the serious crime it was. The Crown Attorney, who fought for justice. The jury, who looked at the evidence and believed the truth. One person speaking up can save a life. Lucas proved that. And I think about David, sitting in prison, and I try to understand how money became more important than his father's life. I try to understand at what point he stopped seeing me as his dad and started seeing me as a financial resource to be exploited. I try to understand how he could look at insurance actuarial tables, calculating my life expectancy, and see an opportunity rather than a horror. I don't have answers. Maybe there aren't any. Maybe greed doesn't need a complex explanation. Maybe some people just make terrible choices. But I also think about the system that allowed this to happen. How easy it was for David to access my accounts once I'd signed over power of attorney. How a son could pick up his father's prescriptions, and no one questioned whether the pills inside matched the label. How financial institutions never flagged the pattern of transfers draining an elderly man's accounts. How it took a 23-year-old grandson with computer skills to uncover what should have been caught much earlier. We need better protections, better oversight, better education for seniors about their rights and the resources available to them, better training for bank employees and pharmacists to recognize signs of elder abuse, better enforcement when abuse is discovered. I've spent the past year working with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, sharing my story with other seniors, teaching them to recognize the warning signs, encouraging them to stay involved in their own financial management no matter how overwhelming it seems. I've spoken to church groups, community centers, retirement homes. I've written to members of parliament about the need for stronger legislation protecting vulnerable adults. Margaret used to say that every experience, even the terrible ones, can be transformed into something meaningful if you let it. She was right. What happened to me was a nightmare. But if my story helps even one other person avoid the same fate, then maybe there's purpose in the pain. Lucas sent me a text message last week. It said, "Love you, Grandpa. Proud of you for speaking out. Mom would be proud too." And I think he's right. Margaret would have been furious at David for what he did, devastated by the betrayal, but she would have been proud that I survived, that I found the strength to fight back, that I'm using my experience to help others. So this is my message to you. Whether you're a senior citizen managing your finances or someone who loves an older adult, stay vigilant, stay involved, ask questions, verify everything, keep your own records. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. You're not being paranoid. You're not being suspicious or ungrateful or difficult. You're being smart. And if you're the family member with access to an older person's finances, if you're the trusted son or daughter or power of attorney, understand the weight of that responsibility. You hold someone's security, someone's dignity, someone's life in your hands. The trust they've placed in you is sacred. Don't betray it. Not for money, not for convenience, not for any reason. Because on the other side of that betrayal is a 70-year-old man who can't look at family photos anymore without feeling sick, who has to explain to his 10-year-old granddaughter why her father is in prison, who wakes up at night wondering what would have happened if Lucas hadn't opened that laptop. I'm lucky. I survived. But not everyone does. So pay attention. Ask questions. Trust your instincts. And remember that the person stealing from you or harming you might be someone you love. That doesn't make it acceptable. That doesn't mean you stay quiet. That means you protect yourself. That means you speak up. That means you choose life over loyalty to someone who's already betrayed you. I'm Richard Williams. I'm 70 years old. My son tried to kill me for insurance money, and I'm telling you my story so you'll recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Don't be a victim. Don't be a statistic. Be vigilant. Be informed. Be safe. And most importantly, be alive to tell your own story.